Because if there was no money to be made on video games, would video games exist? If you couldn't make money, if companies couldn't make money from that, would they exist in the same way?
No. Would they exist? I think so.
But it'd be super limited.
Yes.
And they'd be less mainstream.
Yes.
And thus more artistic.
Wow.
Welcome back to Digitally Distracted. I am Game Dave.
I'm Gerald.
And today we're going to be talking about a question, really. Just a simple question, Gerald. Are video games art? Are video games art, Gerald?
That's a good question.
So you don't have a declarative yes or no on that? I would immediately say yes, just to start out. But this all sort of comes from a topic that we thought about in the past before, but also from a comment on the YouTube posting of the video version of the show. In case you forgot, we are also available in audio format, in a podcast format, Spotify, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, all the basic platforms are out there. I had some people ask me at the Retro World Expo that I attended, you know, is there going to be an audio version? It's like, yes, there is an audio version. It's been out for a while.
Yeah.
Make sure you check that out. This comes from Social Lizard on YouTube. I think you could separate art and fine art. So this is something that we could kind of talk about as we get into
that.
That
resonates with me.
Yes. Google's fine art definition being creative art, especially visual art, whose products are to be appreciated primarily or solely for their imaginative, aesthetic, or intellectual content. Social Lizard's really giving us a lot of information to start with. Like pop subgenres of music or film are usually explicitly created for the money. That's something I wanted to talk about as well. They can generate more than as a tool for people to express themselves. They rarely, if ever, challenge the boundaries for the genre because that's not what they're there for. I'm not saying it's wrong for people to enjoy it or that art has to be that to be worth experiencing, but I'm sure there has to be a worthwhile way to discuss the merits of both sides of that argument because I really do think they're there. It's a lot of talking, a lot of things to say. Art can be what my cat makes in her little litter box. It's such a vague term for many people, but fine art generally requires a serious degree of skill involved, and some games are definitely that. So as a blanket statement to say that games as a whole are an art form, yes, like with music and film, but like music and film, most games don't really fit in with ideas of fine art. So maybe it's an issue of semantics in regards to that argument with my old roommate, the one that I referenced on the show where he and I, it got a bit heated. I don't speak to the boy anymore. If he says classical music is art, maybe he/she meant fine art since it usually requires a much higher level of skill involved than, say, some 3-chord pop song. I obviously am just making assumptions here, but it kind of makes sense.
No, that's true. And I think when someone asks, like, is this art? I think most people automatically put the word fine in front of that in their minds, you know? So it's really someone's asking, is this fine art? I don't really think that, for example, when you just asked me that right now, that's what my brain automatically did. That's why I kind of sort of paused, you know? Clearly it's art in so much as, you know, film and music is art. Yes, absolutely. Is it fine art? Some are, but not all of it, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I rarely think of the term fine art in my daily life ever.
Right.
Even if I'm looking at what would be considered a piece of fine art, I just like, oh, that's art, very artistic.
Right, yeah.
Because I sort of interchange the terms art and a creative work.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, art is any creative work. Maybe not. I don't know. But if we're gonna focus on games to start out.
Right.
This is the term I was kind of thinking of before we got into it here, knowing that we were going to talk about video games as art and really what is art and where that line is drawn, if it needs to be drawn at all.
Was that a pun?
Unintentional, but I'm glad you caught it. That'll make for good clips. Good clip there. I was thinking of this in a term. So a lot of times when you think about love, we're gonna get deep. When you think about love,
we're gonna get to the heart of the matter.
People like to, yes, we are. They think about or people mention love and then unconditional love. So this sort of goes back with the idea of financial gain from our lovely commenter, the social lizard. So I was thinking, what about the comparison of unconditional art versus art for financial gain? So to me, unconditional art would be the truest, the most pure art, because there is no condition with why you're creating it. You're creating it because you're inspired or something within you wants to make it. There's no condition. It's not, well, if I make this, a lot of people are going to look at it, or a lot of people are going to watch it, or a lot of people are going to pay me money for it, or it's going to make me famous. Unconditional art, I think, is probably what people would see. But I think fine art can be conditional too, because there's art that is considered fine art that made money, and wasn't just somebody. I don't know. It's hard to think of an unperverted art form.
Absolutely.
I think it's super rare to see that. And with video games, I mean, most video games were made to be sold.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's really not even free-to-play games are not really free.
Right.
Unless you go back to the days of the early invention of video games, where it was like college campuses and science places where they were just manipulating oscilloscopes and things like that to create a digital game.
I honestly think there still may be games like that, especially mobile games, where you might have some students on a campus wanting to create a game just to do it, or because they want to, and they're not really looking for any kind of financial gain or a gain or to get famous.
Are you sure? Because I feel like some of those college kids are like, we're gonna make
some of them, yes,
game.
Some of them, yes, but not all of them.
Okay, so you do think there's still pure souls out there that are creating. They might create a game in college just because they want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. It's hard to imagine, but I could see that. One instance that came to my mind when it came to game creation. I mean, this most people would probably not count this. So there's a series out there called RPG Maker. I'm sure you've heard of it. And there's been many, many, many games in the series. I had the PlayStation 1 RPG Maker. That was my first experience with it. And I did dabble in the PC versions where you could use assets and sound effects and code to create your own story and RPG and share with other people. I don't think most people created games in RPG Maker to sell because, I mean, how could you? Really?
Right.
And then, I think there's a new version that just came out of RPG Maker recently. So that feels pure, because I remember doing that, and it was strictly because I wanted to make an RPG.
Right.
And I don't even think I even had my friends play it. I never shared it with them.
Yep.
I think I just made it, and then I was like, I made a game just for me. So that is the purest form of fine art I've ever created. And you can kind of connect that with YouTube. I think when YouTube came around as a platform, there were people who were just uploading videos just to upload videos. And I think there were more people in the early days of the YouTube atmosphere that were putting things out there, not because they thought it would get a lot of viewership, because YouTube wasn't a big deal in the beginning.
Right.
And it felt more like art. I feel like it was easier to find artistic video creations on YouTube back then. In my own sort of life, I was creating videos and films and short films and animations and stop motions that were not being shared on the internet. And then when YouTube showed up, I was like, I can just post this here. It'd be a nice way for, if someone wanted to see it, but just for me, so I can have it out there digitized and archived in a way, which is when I started my first YouTube account long ago. I mean, that's what I had this video I made in high school, and I posted it, this animation, posted it on YouTube, made an account, posted it. It was my first video I ever posted, and it was a Lego animation, stop motion. But I wasn't sitting there in the summer, animating Legos because I was like, I'm going to sell this, or I'm going to get ad revenue because that didn't exist on YouTube, or I'm going to get all the views because there wasn't even YouTube when I was in high school.
Right.
unconditional art, I think is super rare. And now you, I think, have a different perspective when it comes to art, because I would say that you would have considered yourself, or still consider yourself, a more traditional artist.
Yeah,
Would you say?
I would agree
Because
with that.
you have had an interest in the more physical art world, in the sense of painting and I guess sculpture as well, a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
Do you want to talk about that, Gerald, a little bit? You want to share a little bit of your artistic prowess, things that you dabbled in? Because I know a little bit about it,
Just a little bit.
but I'll let you reveal what you feel like revealing when it comes to art.
It's just a hobby. You know, I mean, I haven't had any sort of training, so it's just sort of just kind of ways of, to express yourself and whatnot that are, again, I'm not there to make money. I'm not there to, get famous for these things, but I am, like you mentioned before, you have that desire to create, that almost compulsion to create,
Right. Like I dabble in music.
Right.
Some of the themes on the channel, like the main Game Day theme and some other themes like Digitally Distracted, I co-wrote with a friend of the show, Kevin Hoover. He and I worked on music together, and I've always been interested in music creation, going all the way back to Fruity Loops, back when it was actually called Fruity Loops, before it was FL Studio. In high school, I dabbled and sequenced electronic music and things like that. I play keyboard, took organ lessons, because there was nobody available for piano lessons, so I took organ lessons. That's how that works. True nerd. I'm taking the organ lessons. And, music is always something that I'd like to do completely just in my free time. I've never really, I've probably composed like 50 tracks, and none of those are like publicly available. I've never like posted them on the internet or like burned a CD for somebody. It's just music I made and then moved on.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's just nothing I really shared. So that was strictly in the hobby aspect. What would you say is your favorite thing that you created that was artistic, that you would say? Because you don't really create video content,
right?
Unless I pull you in and force you to help me,
right?
So what can you think of that was like one of your favorite pieces of art that you've made that wasn't for like gain?
Probably my marionettes.
Yes, that's what I was getting to. I didn't know if you wanted to drop that out, but Gerald, early on in our relationship, when we first sort of met, came to your apartment.
Yep.
I think I saw you had a couple hanging up. I was like, oh, you have marionettes. Like, oh, actually, I made those. I'm like, oh, all right. Gerald makes marionettes. Very cool. How many do you think you've made?
I've only made 2. I've wanted to make more, but the inspiration kind of ebbs and flows. You know how that goes, and I just moved on to other projects. So
what? Let's get off topic, just because it is so unique. It's not every day you run into somebody who has created marionettes for no reason.
Right.
Like, it's not like you're like, I gotta get these marionettes made for this show I'm doing at the library for the kids. No, you made some marionettes.
Right.
So what inspired that? Why were you like, I'm gonna make some marionettes?
I don't know. I think I wanted to incorporate a number of skills. So there was like some sculpting, there was some sewing, there was just figuring out the mechanics of that, you know, because they're functional. And that's pretty cool. There was some painting. So it just sort of was a collaboration of, I guess, a bunch of my interests to sort of make one piece.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really thought of it in that way, actually, Dave. So, like I didn't realize that that's sort of what I was doing.
See, I had an interest in like puppetry for a while. I was kind of like tried making some puppets back in the day, but then I was like, what am I doing? I gotta focus my time on other things. And that's what kind of sucks when you're trying to maintain some sort of artistic art form outside of like your main job, which sort of the video content and stuff that I produce is that outlet, that creative outlet, though it can also be something for gain because, people watch the show and support the shows and the videos that I make. But I still try to mix things up and try new things and try to be creative and not just get stuck in like oh, I got to do this because this will get the views.
Right, right, right.
You know, make it something I actually want to do and want to talk about. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, especially on the internet.
It's easy to, fall down that hole.
Yeah, especially even if you have like, say you have a Facebook page and you just post drawings, digital drawings that you create or illustrations, and you post those on your Facebook. I think even though you're doing it for yourself, there's something inside all of us where it's like, wow, this got 20 likes, even though, very small, like, oh, I got 40 likes. And then you put your next one out and 2 people like it. It's like, oh, did my art suck?
Right.
Because only 2 people liked it?
Yep. Does it somehow diminish?
And that's that weird thing of, 40 people like this one, but maybe they're like, oh, that's pretty good. But the 2 people that like this one were like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So it's that thing of like the value of each person's involvement because, having a small fan base that's super dedicated compared to having 1 million people that follow your work and they're all like, yeah, his stuff's all right. Yeah, I follow him. But then you have like just 1,000 people that are like, this is my favorite thing.
Right, right, right.
I feel like I would rather have that.
Yeah,
the
I would agree with that.
Like the people that are so dedicated, they get it, that are in they're on your artistic journey with you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What are we talking about? Games? so video games. I think there are people. I think the business structure of gaming gets tricky, just like with movies, where you have the people who want to tell their stories, or they want to develop their game stories or whatever, and make those interactive experience for people. And then you have the companies that have to help those artistic minds make their thing possible.
Right.
And to make their thing possible, there has to be money.
Right.
And you can create a game on your own without outside influence, but it's very difficult and it's very unlikely that you're going to get it out in front of people.
Right.
Probably more likely now.
And that you even have a chance to collaborate with people because some people are of that mindset where it's, like I'm doing art for art's sake. But there's a lot of people out there that, they have bills to pay and you can't fault them for that.
That's true. I think about a street artist who does caricatures.
Right.
They probably don't think, oh man, I can't wait to get on the street today and do these caricatures.
I don't know. They might.
Maybe.
They might.
You think so?
Yeah.
I always wonder that. Like, all right, I gotta get 40 caricatures done to make this day worth my time.
Yeah, that's just it. Is I can see it going both ways.
Yeah.
If it's your job, then I think you are looking at it sort of like I need to get 40 pieces done in order to either make this worth my while or to pay off this bill or whatever.
Yeah.
Versus if you're like, I'm just going to go, and if I make some money, great, and if I don't, whatever.
And I will say that I complain about my job sometimes and that I'd love to be doing this stuff full time as my job, but then there's also that fear that creeps up of if and when I ever get to that point where this can be my 100% full-time focus.
Right.
Would I have that issue where, okay, so I want to make these videos. These are videos I want to make, but I have to support my family and get through the month and pay my bills. What do you do? It's like that weird thing of it becomes work.
Right.
I mean, this is a lot of work.
It is.
To create this stuff, but there's a drive behind it. And my fear is always that if and when I get to quit my full-time job, that will I lose that passion because it's something I now have to do? Because that's the thing. Technically, I could just stop and financially and, my world outside of the internet will not change.
Right.
Technically, I mean, it would, because I know in my mind and in my soul, I would be like, I miss that interaction. I miss being creative. I miss performing and entertaining people and creating things. So, yeah, there'd be a black spot in my heart, but from the outside perspective, my life would go on.
Right.
And, it would be fine. It would just suck a little bit.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you.
But I fear, get rid of that full-time job and then go the other way with it. Would I bastardize my creativity, my
it's tricky,
love of what I like to do?
I think that's every artist's fear. You know, once they're able to either make a living doing it, or if they somehow join forces with some sort of corporate entity to get their art out there more, and there's that fear, like, am I not gonna have rules on what I can create and what's marketable and what's, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to think that, going back to the fine art versus art conversation, I feel like it's very difficult now to get, and this is no attack on younger people, but I think this is accurate, because I might even be the same way. I think it'd be a lot harder to get someone to get a lot of ears listening to Tchaikovsky compared to the latest mainstream music. You know, it's that thing. But even when we were growing up, it's the same thing. Like, oh, that's my parents' old 50s music. But see, even us, we were like kind of into our parents' music.
Right.
Where how it'd be interesting to see when that transition happened, where you had a family where the parents were listening to classical music and the kids were listening to the new rock music, the new old us.
Right.
And it's like, oh, my dad wants me to listen to Bach again.
Right.
You know, I just want to listen to Elvis.
Right.
You know, that's obviously a much larger gap. But it's funny thing, I think even my parents didn't listen to classical music. I mean, my mom, Game Joyce, she wasn't like sitting around like, oh man, I can't wait to put on this this track by Wagner.
Right.
Man, I can't wait to get the Wagner record on. Just jam out. My mom probably doesn't even know about those artists.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I don't know. Like that's that thing of, does fine art have to be popular to be fine art? I mean, obviously, classical music was insanely and is considered insanely popular and cemented in the culture and cultures outside of the U.S. So what? Like, popularity in art, does art get less artistic if it's more popular? I always think about that too, where it's like, oh, you don't understand, it's a cult film,
right?
Only some people get it, which makes it more artistic,
right?
Because most people don't like it. Like, that's boring. Black and white movies, ugh. So like less people like those films as nowadays compared to back then, because back then that's all there was.
Sure.
So that's sort of a weird. What do you think about that? All those things I just said that had no real question. Think about those statements, Gerald.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, as far as
it was. What an amazing point I made. Go ahead, even though it was all over the place.
You know, is art less? Do you take it less seriously, or is it somehow less artistic? If it's widely accepted, you know. If it's accepted by the masses, does that somehow tarnish?
Does it stop being art because everybody appreciates it?
Right.
I think kids and young adults would respect classical music, but I don't think that that's what they want on their iTunes playlist.
No,
necessarily.
It's true.
I think if you did a survey, that would be cool to see, a survey of young adults. Maybe we'll say 14 to 25.
Okay.
So ages 14 to 25, their iTunes library, how many of those people would have classical music in their iTunes library? Maybe just like 10 tracks.
Wow. Like
maybe they have the soundtrack to the Nutcracker.
Right.
Maybe they've got that because it's so iconic.
Right.
Maybe they'll just know it. And there's some catchy music.
Right.
I know when I was as a kid, we talked about Sam Goody. Back in the day,
back in the day.
Physical. Sam Goody, I remember buying Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite on CD there because I just liked the music, And I'm not trying to say I'm better than you because I bought that. I was just a weird kid, who, I didn't even really like the... So to explain that, I was into collecting. I was weird as a kid. Still weird. I was into collecting nutcrackers.
Really?
I wasn't really into the ballet. I'm not a fan of the ballet. I don't like the ballet. It's just weird to me. And I totally respect it. It's just weird to me. The weird things like the feet and nails getting all beat up and just the turmoil that ballet dancers' feet go through.
Right.
Sickens me. And it's hard to watch because I know what's going on. Also, dancers' belts that the guys have to wear to hide their junk. There's a lot of stuff that goes into ballet that makes me uncomfortable. So maybe that's what it is. But I had this weird fascination because my grandmother would always put nutcrackers out for Christmas. My mom would put a couple out, and my grandmother had this giant one. It was like a 3-4 foot tall nutcracker. And, you know, we know those traditional soldiers. Actually, my grandmother never called them nutcrackers. She called them soldiers.
Really?
She'd be like, "Oh, David loves them soldiers." He loves those soldiers. That's what she would always say.
Huh.
I was like, nutcrackers? Because, you know, those are not actually made to crack nuts.
Right.
They would break. You know, the more traditional nutcrackers didn't really look like that. As far as I know.
They're kind of ornamental, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there are nutcrackers that have that soldier look with the mouths that are functional, but I don't think you don't go to, you know, J.C. Penney's and pick those up.
Right.
The Christmas section of J.C. Penney's and Sears is where I got a lot of nutcrackers when I was younger.
Really?
But I would collect them. I don't have them anymore. I just was like, what am I doing? What is the purpose of this? This is weird. This is a weird collection to have. And that music of the nutcracker made me think about them. So that's why I like bought the album to like listen, like, oh yeah.
Okay.
That gets me going. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. But I am not like invested in classical music outside of that, probably.
Sure.
You know, like I know a couple names. You know, we all know Beethoven and some of the classic ones because you hear them brought up in film a lot and things on the internet where they're just iconic.
Yeah, they're
pieces.
like the Titans, you know.
And like a lot of what's really funny to me is a lot of people will be like, "Oh, that's horrible. I hate that music. Ugh, I don't even like the sound of it." Which is amusing to me that a lot of classical music has unintentionally become iconic in horror.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Like a lot of the old school classical songs became like themes used in like Dracula's theme and stuff. Or actually like old school just classical music that wasn't like intended to be horror music.
Right, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's the case. I might be maybe I'm way off base, but I'm pretty sure some, you know, iconic classical music has later sort of been heavily influenced and focused in on classic horror movies. I think. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm way off. Speaking of classical, getting back to video games finally, almost 30 minutes in. Classic video games. You think about classical music, most people, even I would have to agree, yeah, they're art. These classic pieces of music are art. But I'm on the side of, I think modern music is art, as much as I may hate a lot of it. A lot of modern music irritates me and feels trashy a lot of times. But I still feel like it's creative. It's still art. The people behind the scenes that helped make it happen, not the big producers that make all the money off of it, but the people who wrote it. And, you know, it's even like popular vocalists. A lot of times they don't write their own lyrics.
Right.
But you have the people who did. Are they doing it just for the money so they can give it away to this artist? Getting into, not that I want to make this about Lady Gaga at all, but she was, as far as I know, a writer for big pop stars. And then was like, you know what, I should just be doing these. And she sort of got into being a performer of her own music. I believe that was the transition she made. And I could see that being very frustrating where you're putting words into other people's mouths that you want to be performing.
Right. I
wonder if those people, when they're writing those, they're like, oh, this is such a good lyric. Oh, I'm really passionate about this. And then at the end of the day, oh, that's right. This is just going to be sold off to some artist.
Right.
Does it lose its creative value and artistic value from that person?
Interesting.
Do they lose their passion in that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But classic games. So you think about video games that are considered classics, Super Mario Brothers. Are those finer or higher forms of art than a modern game that's like a masterpiece? Very recently, Spider-Man came out. The new Marvel's Spider-Man came out for PS4. I did not pre-order it. I've watched a couple clips and I'm like, crap, I should have pre-ordered that. That game looks amazing. Because I liked the original Spider-Man games on the PS1. They were really good. when they started doing the movie tie-in Spider-Man
Yes.
games, I didn't really care for them, but they're super popular.
Mhm.
People love those games, whereas open world and you could explore. It's like GTA Spider-Man was
Right.
sort of like the comment. This new one looks insane. Like, it looks amazing, like story-driven. Marvel has involvement, classic, just like the movies. There's a lot of talk about maybe they'll use that format and do maybe a Captain America game done in the style of this Marvel Spider-Man game, and basically create I would love to see a Marvel cinematic video game universe.
Wow.
Done in the way that this
Oh.
Spider-Man game is done.
Right.
We should both get it, play it throughout the week, and then do an episode talking about our experiences with that game. That's something
Yeah.
I want to do in the future anyway.
Yeah. That's a good
'cause
idea,
Eventually,
actually.
we're gonna run out of generic topics. Eventually,
Right.
We're gonna need something to talk about. I would love to do like game-based, digitally distracted episodes.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah. Thanks. Worked on it all night. But this game looks amazing. And will that be a classic in the future? Because it's getting like 5 stars everywhere. It's an amazing experience. The story, the music, the graphics, insane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's hard to define an interactive medium as art, I think, for some people. I would say video games are art, period.
Mm-hmm.
But to define, like, what makes it art, I mean, what do you think? Like, when it comes to video games as art, and talking about like classic video games.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think video games are art. I agree with that.
Okay.
But again, I subconsciously put fine in front of that. Are video games fine art? I
And
don't
you
know
would
about
say no.
that. Right.
Because it is conditional.
Yeah.
Because video games are super conditional art because they are based entirely. The continuation of them is based entirely on profit.
Right.
Because if there was no money to be made on video games, would video games exist? If you couldn't make money, if companies couldn't make money from them, would they exist in the same way?
No. No. Would they
Absolutely.
exist? I think so.
But it'd be super limited.
Yes.
And they'd be less mainstream.
Yes.
And thus more artistic.
Wow.
And thus more creatively passionate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just weird. Like, as I want to say yes because they mean so much to me. Is something artistic because it's a creative work? I feel like the consumer of art is who defines whether or not something is art, not the person that made it. You know, and I've said that before about like ownership
Right.
of artistic and entertainment mediums where, you know, sure, George Lucas made Star Wars, but when he put it out there, the fans and the people who loved it and watched it are the people who own it as an icon, which is why when he went back and, you know, I'm going to revamp things. Or even E.T., let's get those guns out of E.T. and put walkie-talkies in their hands. Let's
Right.
digitally change that.
Right.
You know, you've bastardized the art that the people have consumed now, and once they consume it, they take ownership of it, and it's not just yours anymore.
Right.
Which is awesome from a community standpoint and understanding of art, but it also sucks for the creator
Right.
because they lose control of it. Where it's like, oh no, it's put out there, people are interpreting it the way that they want to interpret it. No, that's not what I meant. You're looking at my art wrong.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right.
I'm like, oh, we really think that he was doing this with it. And that we really like the way that he interpreted this. Like, what? I wasn't trying to make a statement about that.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's true.
So that kind of, I think, gets tricky as well. We'll get more into that in a second because it's already time for a game break.
Whoa.
Oh, yes, it's another fan mail unboxing game break. We still have some trinkets from last time where we got to open up all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, that was like Christmas.
It was. And it might be Christmas again. Now, this isn't directly addressed to Digitally Distracted, but hey, if mail gets sent in, we got to show it off.
Oh,
even if it's
absolutely.
not too digitally, even if it's just to me, we got to look at it. So let's cut it open with the old bone hunting knife and see what we're going to get. Whew, boy. This was very well taped, so we'll see. I have not previewed what we're about to see. It should be interesting. Here we go. Oh, goodness. Game Dave. I hope you don't have this already. Your channel is hot like hellfire. You are a huge Final Fantasy fan, but you don't have many Final Fantasy reviews. Do more. Ifrit isn't too much to ask. Ifrit. I always said Ifrit in Final Fantasy. Ifrit. What an amazing summon. This is from Don Barry, chef.
Thanks, Chef.
Are you a chef? Or do you go by Chef Don? Well, Chef. Chef Don. Donnie Chef. Chefenstein. It's funny you say that. I'll throw this out here. So, Suikoden, of course, I've been working on a retrospective series. A lot of progress. I've only done one of the 5 main series games. Suikoden 2 is been in the works for a while. Hopefully that'll come out, but I wanted to do a similar thing, maybe not as intense, but I did want to revisit and do a series of reviews talking about each game chronologically and sort of talk about my experiences with it when I first played it and what I really like about it. I wanted to make it more simplistic so I could actually get through all of the games. I would probably only go 1 through 10 and stop there, but I would like to let me know in the comments on this video if you think that would be cool to see a Game Day retrospective series on the games FF1 through 10. Each one gets its own video, and then I would sort of just, here's 5 things I love about this Final Fantasy, 5 things I don't, and then my personal experiences with it and my take on it. Not full, in-depth reviews, just sort of a fun, sort of retrospective on the games.
Sure.
Let me know if you'd like that. But so hopefully, Chef Don, that will happen. Okay. So we've got, hopefully I don't have this already. He says. Oh, man. I don't have this. And I totally get the card now. It's freaking Ifrit.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Don, Chef Don. Or here it says Gabe. So Gabe, Don, and Chef, all of you.
That's amazing.
That's so cool. I have not this one, but Gerald, you can see I do have 2 of them.
Yes.
I have Odin, and I have the Iron Giant. This is the Final Fantasy VIII Ifrit Guardian Force with freaking Tonberry. I love Tonberry. Tonberry is my number 2 right after Cactuar. Cactuar, my favorite Final Fantasy monster of all time, followed shortly behind by Tonberry. I didn't know Tonberry came with Ifrit. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So at Too Many Games this year, this summer, I was, shop. I didn't really buy anything this year, but I was walking around and there was a guy who had a bunch of the Final Fantasy figures from the games, including FF8 ones. They had Siren and Shiva, I think, and a couple of the other ones. And I almost bought them. And then I looked closer and realized that they were pre-owned. They had been opened, and then they taped these back together onto the card.
Wow.
I was like, I just can't. With action figures, I just got to have them sealed. This is so awesome. I'm speechless, Gerald.
Yeah, I can tell.
This is so good. I'm going to display this right over there with the other ones. This is so awesome. Thank you so much. Goodness gracious. What? I'm giddy, Gerald.
I can tell.
I'm so giddy. I just want to make sure. I didn't want to... Whew. What a fun game break. Thank you so much, Chef. You the man. Ifrit. There's 3 ways to say it. I always said Ifrit as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Logically, it would be Ifrit.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at just the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say?
I'd say Ifrit.
Ifrit?
Mm-hmm.
You're probably right then. I always said Ifrit, but either way, thanks, Chef. And that's going to do it for this game break. Wow. So cool.
Yeah.
Man, I'm excited. what were we talking about? Art?
Right.
Now, this is a piece of art right here. Man, hopefully that's not covering our faces. That'll be good. Deal with it. It's too good to not display.
Right.
So back to it, talking about video games. Are they art? Really, we're talking about what is art, sort of that in that first half. But we started getting into classics, and I want to talk more about what makes a great painting a work of art. What is it about it that makes it a work of art? Because I want to start there and then cross that over to gaming.
I mean, I don't think there's just one thing. I think that's,
Give me a couple.
Okay, so it could be commentary. What's the piece saying about either the content or...
Okay, so it's not just, I really want to paint a cool looking field. You think there's got to be more behind, well, this field represents something.
I mean, it could. It doesn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Because Bob Ross, beloved by the internet.
Oh.
I wouldn't say, each episode, he's done so many episodes, so many of his, basically, what do you paintings with barely even using a brush.
Mhm.
He uses the, what do you call it? The metal knife thing?
The palette.
Palette? Is that what it's called?
I believe so. It's
To me, it just looks like the thing that I spackle with.
yeah, it's shoot, what do they call that?
Because he almost like cuts the paint in.
Yeah.
It's like a scraper.
It's not. I'm having a brain freeze right now.
A brain freeze. I smell it. It's a brain fart. It's a brain fart. I can smell it. Yeah, I don't know what that thing's called. I keep thinking it's a spackler.
I'm pretty sure it's a palette knife.
A palette knife. It sounds legit to me. But he made so many paintings on that show, and each one was not, wasn't trying to make a statement.
Right.
Obviously, he just wanted to make a really cool, nature background.
Right.
In a way. So maybe that's part of it that makes it an art form, that the artist is trying to make some statement about something, maybe. That could be part of it. What else do you think makes a painting a piece of art?
I think technique.
Okay.
Whether that's color theory, whether that's the actual like strokes of the painting,
So the skill involved
right
in creating it.
Right.
Which is true, because an artist generally, you would assume, has some background in art or some skill. But there are also people who have that natural talent. They're naturally gifted and can just create illustrations or paintings without that background.
Right.
Do you think that's something you can notice in someone who is trained doing something and someone who's naturally gifted? Do you think you could point out the differences? Like, you can see here that they're not trained in it because of this, this hatch work here or something.
Right.
Is that something you can notice? I am not a connoisseur of art. I'm not a museum goer.
Right.
So it's not something I'm informed. It intrigues me a lot, but I wouldn't even know. I'd be like, oh yeah, that looks cool. Like that'd be me. The few times we went to one, like in high school or college, we had to go to. We had to do. I took an art history class in college, and one of the requirements was you had to attend a certain number of museums or artistic events. The first one, I did go to an art museum, and I was like, all right, that's a cool sculpture. That looks like a butt to me. That also looks like a butt. I saw a lot of butts. A lot of things look like butts to me, or phallic. Is that weird? Maybe that's me.
I think it might be you.
Oh, that's scary. That's not good. But then I found out that they counted music performances as art.
Oh.
So I ended up going to a couple jazz concerts.
Nice.
Nailed it. Because I love jazz.
Yeah.
Big fan of jazz. Sorry. I got off topic there. But museum art is not something I ever properly appreciated, as I should. It's just something I was like, oh, that looks nice, but I don't know why it looks cool, or why is this displayed? Is it the history of who made it?
Right.
Is it the actual piece itself? Because sometimes, like, oh, yeah, I know this doesn't look too crazy, but this was painted by this guy. It's like, oh, so because he painted it, it's art? Because this game developer made this game, it's art? Because Hironobu Sakaguchi made that game, it's good? It's a good RPG? It's a good?
It's a good.
It's a good. It's a good. I don't know. This is a lot of just spewing for the sake of spewing, because like just to get it all out, because it's something that is indefinable.
Right.
Like our game's art, it's going to vary for everybody. I would say yes. You would say
sometimes
not if you put that fine tag on there.
Right.
And there are certainly games that are strictly cash grabs.
Right. Yes.
There are many cash grab games that exist, I think, where there was no passion or there was no direction, where they're like, all right, I'm just going to use this game making template. I'm going to have this thing where balls bounce around, and to refresh the game, to play it again, you have to spend $1. And I'm going to get it out there, and I want to just make money with it. That exists for sure. But when it's a game company that makes tons of money and they spend millions of dollars on these games, like the Spider-Man game, of course, millions of dollars had to go into that.
Right.
I would assume. Tens of millions of dollars for sure. It's like a movie budget.
Wow.
At that point, And that's crazy to think going back. And I'm sure in the SNES days that some of those games cost tons of money to create. They had to, because there's so many parts, and it was probably harder to make games back then, I would say. Just like because the software and development kits and things that we have now are probably easier to use compared to back then.
Right.
So it probably was harder to make games back then. So maybe the classic games are a little more closer to fine art, because you really had to have a passion for some of those games for them to even happen. especially when you talk about the music, to make really good video game music before we had CD media audio. Like David, I went to when I was at the last MagFest I attended. I went with my good buddies Corey and Try to. I think Corey was there, but either way, the My Life in Gaming boys, friends of the show. We went to David Wise. He did a panel. David Wise is a classic video game composer. He's made so much amazing music. He's really known for his time when he worked with Rare. He wrote the Donkey Kong Country soundtracks. Amazing music. And somebody asked a question, something like, would you like to go back and create music again using the Super Nintendo system the way that you did for Super Nintendo? And he was like, absolutely not. It was horrible. I hated it.
Wow.
Because it was so difficult to write music in this sort of program format. It's not like he could go to his keyboard and jam out some synths and then,
convert it. Yeah,
convert it or compress it and then just put it in the game. Like he had to create like the chip tune bits and everything and like program it. It was more like programming than composing. So he would have an idea of what he wanted it to sound like and he had to figure out a way to make it work. And I think if he wasn't he was getting paid, but if he wasn't passionate about it, would he have created the amazing tracks that he made? No. That's, I think, pretty definitely no. There's no way he could have pulled that off if he didn't care enough about the music and the work. So I think work can become art for sure. I mean, even something as simple as this, like the person that sculpted this action figure obviously cared. And you can tell when an action figure that's supposed to be based on something, the person was just like, well, let's just get it done. We'll get it close enough and just get it out there so we can start selling it.
Yep.
As opposed to someone who takes the time to like put the effort into designing. I mean, but I mean, these are Kotobukiya art artistic pieces. Like they make some amazing stuff for sure. They've been around a long time. It's like that because something was easy to make. Is it not art now? Because something was difficult to make, is it more artistic? I'm going to that same thing when it comes to now the challenge or difficulty of making something. Does that affect it? Because David Wise had to bust his butt to make the stuff he did, which is almost always considered really good. I mean, he goes back, he did music for freaking RC Pro-Am and Cobra Triangle, which are some of my favorite games on the NES, and the music is really catchy. It has this unique sound. That's David Wise. But to sort of try to come to a conclusion, video games as art. If you take away all of the requirements to get a game made and get it out so people can actually enjoy it, I don't know if people ever just make art that's just for themselves anymore. Like if you make something, if you make a drawing or something, even if you just share it with your parents. Like I'm going back to thinking about when I got my first camera and I was making little dumb movies with my action figures.
Right.
I would get it done. It's not like, oh, I recorded it and I just put it in my desk. I was like, Mom, Dad, you got to watch this. And they're like, all right. Well, good for you.
Yep.
I was like, what is he? What is this? What is he? Why is he showing this? So boring. We got to get out of here. I don't know. Even then I wanted to show it to people. I wanted to share it. So maybe putting eyes on it does make it art, because you want to, it's so tough.
It is
to define. I'm sure, and I'm hopeful that the comment section, this is really just a spark for the comment section to really get deep into
comment
this discussion.
Section's really good at
yeah,
they think of things. You guys think of things that
like the comment that really helped push this to being a topic for this week. That I would love to see, and I do. I mean, I don't show up in the comments very much, but I'm absolutely reading those comments because before we shoot, I go through and I read every comment to look for Q&A and things like that before we do an episode. So I'd love to see your discussions on this about art and specifically, I know we didn't touch on it enough, but that's okay. We have a broad brush that we can paint here. It's digitally distracted. It's not just games, but games are the focus in a way. Make sure you talk about that in the comments because I really want to see some cool discussions about what your thoughts are on what makes a video game art. Is it the same type of art as like a classical music track? That does the interactivity of a video game change the way it can be perceived as art?
right.
Because that's the thing with a painting. the artist doesn't paint the painting, put it in the museum, and then when you show up, you interact with it.
Right.
The only way you can interact with a piece of art like that is by looking at it and how you interpret it. That's the interaction.
Right.
Whereas the way you play a game can, in a way, change the experience that maybe the artist that created the game intended. And there's different levels to a video game because there are different forms of art within a video game. You have the music. That's a whole art piece in itself. I mean, I have game soundtracks. I sometimes will just listen to the game soundtrack and play the game and experience the art in that way. Then you have the graphics, like the visuals, which are like digital paintings in themselves.
Right.
Digital sculpture in these 3D models that were created, because some of them are amazing looking. We're getting closer and closer to photorealism in a scary way. I was looking at a clip from the Spider-Man game, going back to that, and I was like, I'm going to probably buy that after this show is over because it's so visually impressive. I was watching some PS4 Pro footage of Spider-Man and Doc Ock going at it, and it was raining, and you were seeing like the rain like trickle over their faces, and it was like, whew, it's getting close to photorealism. And the way it just like goes right into the action from the cutscene.
Oh, wow.
It's almost seamless. I mean, there's still some pre-rendered stuff, but it feels so much more seamless than Final Fantasy VII, where you're in the game and then it cuts to a cutscene and then it goes back to the blocky nature of it.
Right.
Just that seamless nature of it, like you're watching. And that's the other aspect of artistic nature of games, like a movie. So you have the story is art, so the writing, the filmic cinematic aspect of modern games, the music, the visuals.
A lot of components.
It's basically taking all forms of what could be fine art and combining it into one crazy interactive experience. It has to be art. Games have to be art. Fine art, I don't know. Because
I'm absolutely
finicky on what fine art really means.
Yeah, I would agree the games are art. Absolutely.
So we'll say they're art. Are they fine art? Are they classical art in the sense of like classical music? I don't know. We'll leave that to the comments because it's time for a little Q&A. We always got to do a little Q&A from the comments. I got a couple here that we're going to take a look at. The first one seems to be directed at me. This is from Justin Johnson on Twitter, using that hashtag, I hope. Hey, Game Dave, love the Digitally Distracted series. I believe I'm on episode 9. Hopefully you've made more progress at this point. In one of the older episodes, you mentioned a web series that you used to watch. I believe it was a vlog series. By chance, would you know the name of the series? I think that goes back to our life before the internet. I talked about websites and dead websites and stuff. I assume that show was The Show with Zay Frank. I think that was the show that I was referencing. It was one of the earliest, I guess, daily vlogs out there before vlogging was a thing. So that's what it was. Zay Frank's The Show, which I think you can still find it archived somewhere. It's a little tricky to find. He did The Show with Zay Frank, and then later he did sort of a callback show called A Show with Zay Frank, which was not as regular. Because his original The Show was every day, Monday through Friday, for an entire year. And he's like, when we get to that year, that's it. It's over. And unlike everybody else on YouTube and whatever video platform where it's like, the daily vlogs are eventually going to come to an end. No. Because it gets super successful and fruitful, and they just run it into the ground like a sitcom that won't give up, that won't die. Whereas he was like, no. He's like, even though it is probably as popular as it's ever been, I'm stopping on this day. And he did. And I was like, oh, it's over. That's crazy. So sometimes it's good for things to stop.
Right.
And move on and move on to something else. Sometimes that's good. So what I'm saying is this is the last episode of Digitally Distracted. Thank you so much for being with us on these, 15 episodes. So I always said 15, that's it. I'm kidding. We're not there yet. So there you go, Justin. Hopefully that answers your question. I believe that's what it was. Next one we have from Mr. Bananas. Mr. Bananas said, question for the next podcast. This is interesting. How do you find retro gaming friends? I'm 16, and maybe this adds to my difficulty with finding people who also appreciate this hobby. How have you met your retro gaming buds? So I'll start. For me, obviously I'm older, so I grew up with the retro. To me, it was new back then. The few people that I grew up with, I had the benefit of, being able to share retro gaming with them as we grew up. My good buddy Steven, who I've mentioned on the show, who unfortunately passed away. He and I probably kept up the most with those retro games, mostly RPGs. That was our big thing. We would talk about RPGs and play old games well past their prime. But now, really, like in the real world, my offline life, very few people. I recently met a coworker's husband. A coworker's husband found out he was very interested in retro games. And he came over not too long ago, and we played some old school games. Like, oh my gosh, I totally remember this. So it's sort of the weirdest places you might find, but that's somebody who grew up with this stuff.
Right. It's difficult if you're younger now.
Yeah.
That's a hard call.
Yeah, I think the internet is a major thing. Conventions are huge. Retro World Expo, too many games. Like there's conventions for these hobbies, and it's certainly a community where you can meet people. And for me, people that I discuss retro games with and get to continue being passionate about the hobby with are people I've met through the Game Dave channel. A lot of my good friends, Corey and Try, 8-Bit Duke, Johnny Millennium, like a lot of these fellow YouTubers and people who do video content online about retro gaming and gaming in general. These are people that I've made real friendships with and have gotten to continue maintaining this interaction with people about gaming that I otherwise probably wouldn't have. I probably would have just grown out of it if I didn't have this community. Like, it's something I would have still done, but I wouldn't have people to talk about it with, so it would feel so isolated.
Right, yep.
And the isolation aspect of it would probably make it more difficult for me to maintain it. Whereas finding, there's other people who still care about this stuff makes me care about it more.
Yep.
And then with the Japanese import stuff, discovering things I didn't know that would have existed when I was playing these games over the seas. And Jimmy Hoppa from Import Gaming for the Win, great friend who's opened my eyes to more import stuff, and we share a lot of similar interests, especially with our love of Suikoden and obviously the Famicom. Check his channel out. He's got some crazy in-depth import gaming reviews. Import Gaming FTW for the Win. That's his channel. Make sure to check him out. Yeah, I mean, being 16, I'd say conventions, interacting online, getting linked into communities. The Game Dave community is one that certainly has a passion for retro games. Just latching onto those communities online is really the last vestige, especially for someone who's younger, who might be in high school. Not a lot of kids in high school are probably picking up Super Nintendos on eBay and playing games on them. So, I mean, but maybe not. I mean, you are.
Right.
You got to keep it alive.
Right.
So it's up to you. It's up to you, Mr. Bananas. This is your mission. This is your superhero calls, Mr. Bananas. I hope that's your superhero name, Mr. Bananas. When you're playing the Fate Supers campaign.
Right.
That'll be my next character for you, Gerald. Mr. Bananas.
I love it.
He can just turn into a banana. Like,
I
that's
love it.
all he does.
Yep.
Nutrition at any moment. So that's going to do it for the show. I've already stated, you can check out the show in an audio format. Look up on your podcast platform of choice. You will find Digitally Distracted. They post the same day as the video episodes, so you're not going to get left behind. Don't worry. You can listen to it and you can watch it. Either way helps. Either way helps the show. And if there's a topic that you want to hear discussed on the show, or you have a question for us to answer, you can leave it on this video as a comment. You can leave it as a comment on the podcast. You can also find me on Twitter. Use the hashtag #DigitallyDistracted to help me find your question, comment, or topic. And, you can always join the Discord, or you can support the show on Patreon. Turn this art into work with Patreon. So I'm Game Dave.
I'm Gerald.
Thanks for getting digitally distracted with us.